byproduct of the gas production, it also produces certain types of fertilizer. So that's one thing. And then the other thing about the inflation is that regardless of the war in Iran, more recently started, a lot of the inflation was already baked in the cake with the tariff policies, which are inflationary, and that was going to cause ripples of inflation through the economy. And the other part of it is, and I'm less clear on this, is, and it's more of a question than somebody that's a real economist, is that with the tax cuts to the rich in the big beautiful bill, so-called big beautiful bill, that put a lot of pressure on the economy. It put pressure on the national debt, and this is a question, not an answer, but when you have so much of the wealth of the burden of the country that being disproportionately put onto the middle class and poorer Americans, really the middle class, because of this big beautiful bill giving tax cuts to the rich, is that inflationary? And that may be a factor that I certainly don't have an answer to, but it's a question. Maybe somebody else can answer it. That's it. Thanks.
Thank you, William. Brett, followed by David.
So I kind of agree that the president is in marketing. I just think the Democratic Party has successfully hired him. That comment will be on every TV ad known to earth. And the reason it is effective is because, one, inflation is going up. Two, the numbers on inflation in the economy for the president are poisonous. Consumer sentiment is at its lowest level ever, and kind of the third reason is because the president's there's a direct causal matter when this president is living on two countries and
Gary, I think this is the whole political situation. And let's face it, he's got this re-internet big kind of mentality. And, American people do not like to fall destroyed by needless war situations that aren't necessarily well thought out, or with the end game in the future as to how it will all end. Americans, we enjoy a certain standard of living. Well, part of our refrain around the world is that we have this superior way of life that's born on the back of our freedoms, our ability to innovate, to work hard, to see results at the end of the month. And this gets stripped away when Americans get their income stripped away stealthily by inflation, because that's really what it is. It's a tax. It hits, and people.
It's just a tax. It's not perpetual debt. It won't eat into core services.
Tech industry being overheated and so forth, and so there's a potentiality that 401ks are also going to deflate, and so how do Americans climb out of? They can't work any harder. Most Americans are salaried, W-2'd. There's a big chunk of us that work as self-employed, and we feel our economy, Gary, because we don't derive huge social safety nets and benefits that other European type style democracies benefit from. The guy loses his job, he's got to whiten up 6 weeks of unemployment if that, he can't even live off of it. As some of my European friends tell me, they got a year to figure out a good job, health care coverage and all that. So we endure a lot more pain than we don't do as a country. And we have amnesia. We talk about World War II, that great generation that got us through that. Well, those people are all pretty much gone. They died. And we don't forget their sacrifices. Because that's what got us through to something now is the biggest nation on the planet. So, like, what do you have to do? The politician has to answer account for that. And unfortunately, many of the people on the right, the politicians can't challenge this person. Others have challenged Carter, Reagan, down the line. President Trump operates as a boxing boss. Find out who you are. He knows who you are. You can primary, find candidates, saddle up to state points. And he's going to throw money behind you. He's going to take you out. And we've seen this also play out in regards to our international policies. So I think the main threat is that and I think that as to your point, he says what he says. And thank God that he says what he says. He says what he means ultimately, because now we have information by which to check his power and the things he's trying to execute. Because it's on us now. We have the onus as Americans, politicians included. And this gets to rally against the very things that he's talking about trying to get away with. I mean, we've seen how he is trying to neuter and defang our voting processes, mail-in ballots, redistricting, and the like, and potentially creating a national emergency disaster by which
there's a potentiality that 401ks are also going to deflate.
So,
and so,
man that
how do Americans climb out of
is about
they
his
can't.
own ego, his own power, achieving his own potential objectives, whatever those are. And whether they align with our interests or not, doesn't seem to be important to him. So I think he can message a lot better with regard to the pain points we're experiencing as a country. But he doesn't do that, Gary. He doesn't. He double down. He double downs on the pain. And he uses the politicians that are tasked with taking this to their constituents how to explain this, right? So how do you explain it in public without incurring the wrath and ire? We see this attempt to grandstand and showcase cage fighting on the White House lawn. I'm sure there's many GOP representatives ask themselves, scratch their head, like, well, we got bigger fish to fry. What are we doing displaying this? So
Peanuts and circus.
the aggrandizement, Gary, is eventually going to run out. I don't think we can tolerate too much more of it. And hopefully our 2026 election outcome reflects that. And I'll end there.
Thank you, David. We'll go to Daryl, and we'll see if the other folks we've been inviting up can make it, because we've invited folks up.
Hey, Gary, can you hear me?
No, we cannot.
Okay, well, two things. I'm going to preamble for a minute. First, I am so happy to see my buddy Scott back. And Gary, I don't know if you're going into Penn, but it's crazy because of the game tonight. And they're making people walk 4 blocks south and north just to circle back to 8th Avenue to get to New Jersey Transit. So I don't know if you were going in, but I want to let you know.
Well, yeah, but the train drops me off inside Penn Station, so I'm inside already, so I don't have to walk around to get inside.
But do you leave or you work in Penn?
No, I'm on the way into work.
No, what I mean is, do you have to leave Penn Station to your office, or do your office?
I take the subway. Take the subway.
Oh, lucky you, Gary, because I just had to walk all the way down to 26th Street to get over to Penn. So, quickly, to William's point, the tax cuts don't necessarily trigger inflation. Tax cuts can trigger inflation. It's dependent on how they structure the tax cuts. The tax cuts to the rich, the last round, won't necessarily trigger inflation, but what they'll do is, because it's less tax revenue, we'll probably have to increase our debt, like issue more like bills and bonds and notes and stuff. So it's going to increase our debt. What I think we should be more concerned with was the jobs report, because the jobs report was good. And so what that means is that it's less likely that the Fed is going to lower rates. If the jobs report had continued to be bad, the Fed might have considered lowering rates to kind of help the economy. But if more people are working, then the Fed doesn't see it as necessary to lower rates. And so the impact that that's going to have is like the 10-year
But he doesn't do that, dude. He does double down. He double downs on it.
impacts not only
And he's the politicians. They're making this to their constituents how to explain this, right? So they're not explaining it without incurring the wrath and ire. We see this attempt to grandstand showcase cage fighting the White House lawn. I'm sure there's many of you GOPers asking themselves, scratch their head like, we got bigger and bigger. Here, finish the point. What are we doing? We're going to disappoint this. So, the introduction is I don't think we can tolerate
Trump whisperer, right?
but now flex
We should listen to what he's saying, don't take him at his word, because
Thank you, David. Go to Daryl, and we'll see if the other folks we've been inviting up can make it, because we've invited folks up.
only
Hey, Gary, can you hear me?
a number of people
No, we cannot.
knew him.
Okay, well, 2 things. I'm going to preamble for a minute first. I am so happy to see my buddy Scott back. And Gary, I don't know if you're going into Penn, but it's crazy because
To the Trump whisperers who say, well, that's not what he meant. One, how do you know what he meant? And two, then why should we believe anything that he says? How do we pick and choose what we want to believe simply because it makes us feel better, because it sounds like something we want to believe, as opposed to when he says something we don't believe, okay, now he's lying, now he's telling the truth. This is exhausting. And I think the average American, whether you're red or blue, is just exhausted with this bullshit and trying to figure out if the leader of our nation is telling us the truth ever. And it's just fucking exhausting. Excuse my French, right? It's like, it's like battered spouse syndrome, right? Your spouse kicks your ass, but then they bring you roses or they bring you chocolate. And then, you'll forgive them until they're kicking your ass again. And I think I think our country is going through some type of PTSD. And I think everybody just wants to get off the train, to use that euphemism.
Thank you, Daryl. We'll go to Steve, and hopefully we'll get to Ann as well. Steve.
Gary, good afternoon. It's good to see you and Scott and everybody else back together. Considering that I live in Los Angeles, the homeless capital of the country, I thought I would bring up some interesting euphemisms that go along with homeless and unhoused. For example, human error frames the individual mistakes as natural, unavoidable flaws that are caused by the system. Capacity constraints implies a person failed because the system lacks the staffing or resources needed to succeed. Process breakdown suggests a bad outcome happened because because of the rules or workflows were flawed in the system, not because of the individual. Skill gap redefines poor performance as a structural training deficit within the organization, i.e. the system. Communication gap shifts the blame to the overall information sharing framework rather than a person who failed to learn linguistics. Systemic issues highlights an ingrained flaw in the organization and the system and society's structure that is inherently causes poor results. Macroeconomic factors attributes an individual's financial or professional struggles to a large-scale, unavoidable economic trend because of the system. And two more, workforce realignment, a corporate term that masks mass layoffs or firing as a broad structural
As opposed to when he says something, okay, now he's lying around, he's telling the truth. This is
explains a failure by pointing to rigid, overreaching rules that made a good outcome impossible by the individual. How does this go back to homelessness as or unhoused? I believe that the euphemism has to do with putting the blame away from the individual being homeless, and unhoused is a euphemism saying that it's society's fault. Now, I'm sure each individual situation carry its own set of facts and opinions, but to me, it always has been homeless. It always will be homeless. If it goes down easier for some people to say unhoused, that doesn't, in my mind, shift the blame to away from the individual and to the society. You can use words any way you want, and they're just words. They don't really talk about what's really going on in the individual situation. Thank you, Gary.
And I will point out that that famous poem that is attributed to the arrival of the great gift from the French people, and that would be the Statue of Liberty, says, give me your homeless. It doesn't say give me your unhoused. And so I don't know why it's politically incorrect to call somebody homeless.
And the French have been screwing us ever since, and they constantly talk bad about the American government and Americans as well.
Well, that's an attitude that is ingrained in their society. Thank you, Steve. We'll go to Ann and maybe Tom, but I don't think so. Anyone else, so I'm not going to call anybody else up on the stage. Ann?
Hey, Gary. The U.S. national debt is at $40 trillion, and the debt to GDP is 121%. In 1980, it was 34%. So regardless of who the president was or is, whether it was Kamala Trump, it's my opinion that Kamala would have taken our debt to GDP to 200%. And she would have invested in woke programming. I mean, most of DOGE eliminated educational programs for woke education, LGBTQ stuff. It's all out there. And thank God we have Donald Trump, who is our president, who eliminated all this fraud, waste, and abuse. AOC's multi-trillion-dollar Green New Deal.
What does that have to do with the question? And I allowed for the homeless discussion because I brought it up earlier. But what does your projections of what might have happened if Kamala had been hired as our president, and your analysis of how great a job DOGE has done, which is held by some but not by all, have to do with the president?
To do with putting the blame away from the individual being homeless.
Yeah, I think when Trump says he loves inflation, he's saying that he loves the power that he has to spend and engage in what he wants to engage. Because if we had a balanced budget of $5 trillion a year, not the $7 trillion, he would actually have no power because it's already all allocated. And so that is a trick that every president is essentially exploiting. And until we actually have a balanced budget in this country and start paying down our debt and eliminate wasteful spending, especially in Medicare, Medicaid, we will continue to see inflation. I think somebody earlier said that it's not just the inflation, it's the actual job marketplace. I mean, if you don't have a job and you don't have an income, the inflation is a little bit irrelevant to you because you can't even survive. If you do have a job and you are earning an income, well, then you're just trying to keep up with inflation. So there's those two aspects. But I'm just saying that when Trump just says stuff because he's on camera. It's just like a clubhouse room. He's going to say stuff and then people attack him for it. But either way, our economy, 40% of it is borrowed. And we're spending $7 trillion a year. We're only taking in $5 trillion. It doesn't work this way. Our debt to GDP at 122% is not functional for our society. We have to cut the spending and we have to start paying down the debt. We can't keep kicking the can down the road and say this is a civilizational economy, that everything is baked in, and if America goes down, then it all goes. It's not the way it works. We're doing altruistic economic policy. State and economy are connected. We should have them separated in the same way we have separation of church and state. And it's my opinion.
And I'm going to let you have the last word because we are out of time. Thank you for that. But I would just add, I'm not so certain everybody would consider Medicare and Medicaid as wasteful. Folks, we're here Monday through Friday from 5 o'clock New York time. So at 5 o'clock New York time tomorrow for the next edition of the Critical Thinking Forum. Until then, everybody be safe, be well, and peace out.
People did not like what I had to say. A lot of anti-Trumpers in there.